Thank you for joining me for the Better Than I Found It podcast. This is Mike McGraw, the men's golf coach at Baylor University. I'm excited to welcome Tulsa women's coach Annie Young to the podcast today. Annie was a senior on the women's team at OSU, the only year that I was the head women's coach at Oklahoma State. And she's easily one of the hardest working student athletes I've ever come in contact with. Her competitive mindset actually matched her work ethic. She was really competitive. I love this interview not just because of our relationship, but also because she was so open, she was honest, she was really vulnerable, and what she had to say in this interview really rings true. Without further ado, let's get right to that interview. Welcome to the Better Than I Found It podcast. I'm Mike McGraw, your host. Today's guest is the women's golf coach at the University of Tulsa, Annie Young. Annie, welcome today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You bet. You know, obviously I've been looking forward to this podcast because you and I have a history going way back. And the few people that have been on this podcast that I've actually coached, and there have been a few, it's always enjoyable because there's so many sort of intimate stories of coaching and players. And, you know, there were times when you got upset with me and I was upset with you, and that's just a coach and player thing. It's part of it. But I've been excited and looking forward to this.
Yeah, we have some good memories from, you coached me my senior year, but you've known me since my freshman year, and I hope I've changed quite a bit since then.
Yeah, well, you don't look any older, I'll tell you that. I on the other hand, have changed a little bit. But so let's do this. Let's just hop right in and let's get some background on you. You are in Oklahoma and you played college golf in Oklahoma and you've coached in Oklahoma, but you're not an Oklahoma girl. You're from Utah. Tell us about your childhood, growing up in Utah. You were an athlete. So talk a little bit about that and give us some background.
Yeah, so I grew up in just outside of Salt Lake in a city called West Valley City. It's kind of a lower income area. And, you know, to be honest, I took pride in being from there. I think it made me who I am today. But I grew up playing every sport. You know, girls grow up playing softball. I played baseball, played basketball, volleyball, everything under the sun that I could. And I got to contribute that to my cousins who, you know, we go over to grandma's house and everything was a competition, whether it's cards or, you know, if we had a ball of any sort, we're competing. And that's still today when we get together, same kind of deal. But I loved playing every sport. I didn't get to where I loved golf, I would say, until maybe like age 13. I started at age 8, but you know, I wanted to be with my friends playing other sports. And so I played basketball all growing up, even through high school. I was fortunate to have a basketball coach that allowed me to play, you know, even when I wasn't able to go to summer camp, she still allowed me to be on the basketball team. So played both sports, you know, through high school. Golf, we had, we didn't have a women's team. So I played on the men's team. And I enjoyed that. I loved every minute of it. I think it made me a better golfer. And the basketball career, you know, I'm 5'3". There wasn't going to be college basketball, but the way I approached it is, you know, I'm going to be the best basketball player I could be. And I was a big fan of John Stockton growing up. And so it wasn't about scoring points for me. It was about let's get as many assists as we can get. And so we had really good basketball teams. My senior year, we played in the state championship and I tore my ACL with 2 seconds left. I shot the 1-and-1 to win the game and back rimmed it, went to overtime, and I didn't get a play. But, you know, those just playing different sports kind of made me who I was on the golf course, and kind of has made me who I am today and who I like to recruit. You know, I like to get players that play multiple sports, and unfortunately that doesn't happen as much today, but I love a good athlete that's competitive.
You know, the last several years of my coaching career, I've been trying to recruit athletes as well. Kids that have played, well, for a couple of reasons. One, they're just more athletic. That's good. Two, they're probably in better condition because they've continued to play other sports. But one of the underrated parts of that is they play team sports. And when you have somebody that plays team sports, it's going to be easier as a college golf coach to kind of get them into the team atmosphere, don't you think?
Absolutely. I think we're such a unique sport that we're taking an individual sport and we're all going to play on a team and we need to support each other. But the best way to help the team is to beat your teammates. And so, it's very important to have good teammates that, I was actually listening to your podcast earlier in the day, and talking about Hunter Mahan and what a good teammate he was. And just how important even the best player needs to be a really good teammate.
I agree. And Hunter was an amazing teammate. And I didn't realize it when he was in college as much until he turned pro and was gone. That first year he was gone, all the guys would do in practice would stand around and talk about Hunter did this and Hunter showed me that and whatever. So it really showed up that he had done a lot of pouring into his teammates. And he was really, really good at that. And I know you gleaned some information from Hunter while he was there.
Yeah, I absolutely love my time practicing with Hunter. He wasn't the most outgoing guy all the time, and you felt like you were bugging him sometimes, but he could teach you so much. And so, I picked his brain that freshman year. I didn't know how to practice. I wasted a lot of time, and I finally learned how to practice and do that by the end of my freshman year. But he taught me how to practice. I use some of the stuff today with my players that he had shown us. And Alex Noren, same way. Him and I were like brother and sister in college, and so it was really fun to have those guys to practice with, along with Zach Robinson.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that because it's an unusual dynamic. Sometimes you get a women's team where the girls aren't as motivated. Sometimes you get a men's team where the guys aren't as motivated. But you and Karin Sodine, who also played the LPGA Tour, you guys were a couple of girls that probably would have done very well in the men's team. You'd have been great. You could practice with the guys. You loved competing with the guys. You didn't mind going out and playing 9 or 18 holes with the guys. You did a lot of that. And I have this mental image in my brain of you and I and Zach Robinson. It was a north wind, about 15 miles an hour, 42 degrees, and raining. And we just kept practicing. Do you remember that day?
Absolutely. Those are kind of the things that stick out in your mind. I think a lot of it was Zach and I, we didn't want to be like, if Zach and I were out there practicing, I didn't want to leave before him. It was kind of that, but we also knew if we're going to be good players in the rain, you better practice in the rain and you better practice in the cold. And so, but credit to you as a coach to stay out there with us too. Those are some of the fond memories I have of college, of those great practice sessions, of just trying to get better in the tough conditions. That's one of the reasons I came to OSU is I was recruited by a few schools, and one of them being Pepperdine. And, you've got Malibu and you've got Stillwater, Oklahoma.
There's no difference.
No difference, is there? When I went on my visit to Malibu, I loved the beach, but I knew I'd be at the beach. And I knew if I went to Stillwater, Oklahoma, there's one thing I'm going to be doing, and that's playing golf, and at a very, very good place. And there weren't going to be a number of distractions. And so my sister, to this day, she's still angry that I went to OSU and I didn't go to Pepperdine, where she could have come and hung out with me. But that's why I went to OSU, is because I knew I was going to become the best golfer I could be.
Well, and it was certainly a good byproduct to have guys like Hunter Mahan and Alex Noren and Karin Sodine, she was an amazingly talented girl. In fact, I was shocked at how far she could hit a golf ball. It was amazing. But you had those examples around you, and you found ways to get better, because I wouldn't say you came in as the number 1 ranked junior player in the country by any stretch. In fact, you were sort of just a multi-sport athlete who Amy Weeks, the women's coach at the time, saw something in you that she thought, that girl can play. She told me about you too, well before. And I have actually ended up seeing you at the Junior World, I think, before you got on campus. And I thought, well, she's not very big, but she sure hits it straight. So you didn't miss a lot of fairways in college. I do recall that.
Yeah, I would love to talk to Coach and ask her, what got her interested in me. I know what did help was Pete was there, Pete Stone and Summer Hayes, Boyd Summer Hayes. And, by the time I got to school, they weren't there anymore, but they got me interested in the program. And I was, I'm grateful to this day that I decided to go there.
So that's an amazing record, a really great run of great play that you had. And all of that is amazing to look back at. But I coached you, and I remember thinking when I became your coach in August of 2004, I kept on thinking, wow, I'm going to get to coach this really good player. But I've been coaching her all along. I mean, I had been around you a bunch. And I'll never forget the first day on that practice tee when I got the job, and we're down, you're just hitting balls, and you seemed a little nervous. And I said, Annie, you all right? And you go, and by the way, your name was Annie Thurman at the time.
Yeah.
And she said, oh, I've got something to tell you that I'm a little nervous to tell you, but I need to tell you this. And I said, well, go ahead. I thought, oh, well, she's going to transfer. She's turning pro. I'm not going to get this great player in my team or something. I could imagine all the things. You said, well, in December, Caleb and I are getting married. And I said, well, fantastic. I'm so excited for you. That's fantastic. You were so shocked that I was excited for you. And do you remember what I told you by any chance? Do you have a memory of that?
Yeah, you said, I think that's the best idea for you, because why would, you can paraphrase this a little better, but why would you want to be away from the one you loved? You're going to play, you're going to be the happiest person when you're around the person you love.
Exactly what I said. You're going to play a lot better in Stillwater with your husband in Stillwater than with him in Utah or your heart in Utah. It made a lot more sense for him to be here. And you all got married, and that was the first married person I'd ever coached right there as a head coach. But that was great. Actually, your golf game got better and better and better. So Caleb was a good influence on your golf.
Absolutely. I think I definitely played my best golf there. And the reason I was a little nervous to tell you that is I had gotten a different reaction from somebody else when I had told them, and I was a little worried to tell you. And, I'm young. We actually were going to get married in May, and we hated the long distance relationship. And so we thought, why not, we had a cheap wedding, and it just kind of went along with how my life's been. Just keep it cheap and let's do it, but it was a good experience. We were poor. He worked at the golf course, and I would do it again, get married that semester.
Travis Levings, the superintendent at Karsten Creek, told me Caleb was one of the best employees he'd ever seen in his life. And yeah. I firmly believe that. And Caleb actually on the road in the spring at those tournaments, he stayed with me. Caleb was my roommate at the tournaments.
Yeah, I remember him staying on your floor. I think it was in Austin.
Yep. Oh yeah. Yeah. He
slept. Always make sure we were taken care of. So that was good.
That was really good. So let's talk a few other stories that I think are quite interesting from, in my book, Better Than I Found It, I documented a story about a cold sandwich on a Learjet. A lot of people have heard that story. And so I don't know if we need to rehash the whole story, but to paraphrase or to shorten the story, one of the players in the team got upset because she had a cold sandwich instead of a warm sandwich on a Learjet. And I don't know if I overreacted, but I definitely reacted. What were your reactions to that?
I think I was pretty much along the same lines as you, as we're really going to complain that we have a cold sandwich flying private. You and I probably grew up similar circumstances where it wasn't flying private to golf tournaments. It was driving to golf tournaments. And so the thought of getting to fly private was quite the, how should I say? Well, it was a luxury, and nobody else was doing it. And so for somebody to complain was, it was a bit frustrating. And what came after, I get it. I get it as a coach now for sure. But, I'll tell you, there were a couple of us that I don't know if I should say this, but at the time we wanted to kill her.
Well, it did upset me. And the next tournament we drove a 7.5 hour drive to Austin, Texas. I drove 55 miles an hour on purpose. We made it a 10-hour trip. We only stopped to go to the restroom one time. And we listened to country music very, very loudly the whole way. Willie Nelson, Waylon Jennings, all of that. And we stopped in Dallas to eat. And I remember pulling into the subway, and I looked in the rearview mirror and I told that young lady, I said, "You'll be so thrilled to know Subway is now toasting their sandwiches. You can get a warm sandwich here." Oh my gosh. I don't know. The rest of you girls must have been so mad at me. But you know what? We finished second to Duke, the #1 team in the country, by one shot at that tournament. We played great.
And we should have won. You remember that story?
I do remember that story. In fact, that was what I was going to segue to. You were in contention to win the golf tournament, and we got to the 17th hole, and you'd hit your approach shot to the right of the green. And I think it took you 5 or 6 to get up and down.
Too many. Too many.
And you lost the tournament. Now, we ended up losing by 1, so you were devastated.
Yeah.
And you had lost the individual title as well. And so this was a good coaching moment for me, because I felt like I had been overlooking your short game for a bit. And you're talking about a girl that you were so straight off the tee, you hit most of the greens. So you didn't use your short game that much because you were putting for birdie most of the time. But when you did, you probably weren't, you were just average around the greens. And on this particular hole, it was a really hard shot. You made I think a quadruple bogey, maybe a quintuple. Any way you look at it, we lost by a shot.
Let's go with triple, or, soften it up a little.
Okay, that's fine. But what happened after that was really, really good for our relationship. I was really tough on you. Can you describe what we did when we got back home?
Yeah, so I think I came to you and said, "How am I going to get better? Like, this isn't going to work." And you basically said, "Hey, you want to play the LPGA Tour, right?" Well, yeah, that's my wish. Well, guess what? You're not going to play the LPGA Tour with that short game. And you're not going to win golf tournaments with that short game. And I think that year I finished second a number of times, because if you remember, I was after that hat that you had.
Yeah, I had a nice swinging Pistol Pete hat that you wanted, and I wasn't giving it to you until you won. And in those days, the women could not use that logo.
Yeah, so that was a gender issue back then. But no, so the short game was terrible, and you basically said, "You suck at your short game sucks. So you either get better at it, or you're going to continue to do what you're doing."
Well, and one of the things, though, that I said, I'll be willing to help you too. So let's, and that's what we did. We got in the dirt and started working. And I will say this, you did the work. I sort of pointed you in the right direction. A month later, we went back to the same golf course, the UT Golf Club, and you won the conference championship.
Yep. And I birdied that hole.
You did birdie that hole. And on the final hole, I didn't care that we were tied, but we did know we were tied. And the girl from the University of Texas hit her tee ball in the bunker. And you hit a driver down the middle and a 5-iron 25, 30 feet right of the hole. And she hit it in the water the second shot. We ended up winning by a shot. And you led us to that tournament title, the Big 12 champion.
Let me tell you a story there. So you had been telling me about Jack Nicklaus has never 3-putted the last hole of a tournament. To lose a major. And I was going to win the tournament. But I just had in my head, Jack Nicklaus has never 3-putted the last hole of a tournament. Well, I left myself, I think, 6-7 feet to just a terrible lag putt.
Yeah.
And all I could think about, I wasn't thinking this is to win the tournament. I was thinking, Jack Nicklaus has never 3-putted the last hole of the tournament. And that was, which was good, because it got me kind of in a different place, but made that putt, and it was a good win. It was fun for us all. I think it was great. And the young lady who didn't like the cold sandwich at the first, after that early trip in the season, she ended up finishing 6th, and she was an all-conference player, really happy. And she's a sweet gal too. And I think we all learned from that whole experience about being grateful, thankful, and not taking things for granted, for sure. So I think it was January of 2004, Golf Digest was going to do
about a 15-page article on physical fitness in college golf. And so they were calling around to several universities around the country, and they called me and Mike Holder and said, hey, do you have players on your team that might want to do that? So we picked you and Karin Sodine and Zach Robinson and Casey Wittenberg on the men's team. And so you guys had 2 months to kind of prepare for this photo shoot. Now I'm gonna let you take it from there. Describe those 2 months and describe everything that happened for this photo shoot for Golf Digest.
Yeah, so we were excited. So Zach and I were really good friends. We came in at the same time and we were always together, but he had said, Annie, we got to do 2-a-days. We've got to start eating better. You know, he had us on a plan. So I think we worked out pretty much at the same time as you guys.
Yeah.
When we'd get back to our apartments, I'd go over to his place to eat breakfast, and we'd make, and I hate eggs, but he said, we're going to have eggs every morning. We're not going to have, carbs. We're just going to cut everything out. So I go to his house and he cooks up some egg whites. And I'm like, well, we got to put on, can I have some ketchup or something on this? No, we've got to get dedicated to this. So I ate the egg whites. I think that was basically every morning. But then we started doing 2-a-day. So it was the off season. So we had time to do that. We'd go over to the rec center. We'd play basketball in the evenings. That was one fun thing, hanging out with the guys, is we'd play basketball all the time as well. But we do, we were crazy about this. And then it's photo shoot day. And I think, what was the temperature? I know it was freezing.
It was about 48 degrees and a little bit of north wind. So it was cool and cloudy. So it wasn't a very good day to take pictures.
No, so it's terribly cold, but we're, in the least amount of clothing that we can wear. And, this is Zach's, he's going to be an underwear model after this. And so he's pretty excited. And he's asked me, what do you do if they ask you to pose nude? And I'm like, Zach, really? I said, absolutely not. And he said, well, I'd do it. That's Zach being Zach. But towards the end, if you remember, towards the end of the shoot, we were in that barn and there was a fence and they wanted me to go out there and pose from the waist up without a shirt on. They were going to shoot my back. And I knew this time might come. And I said, absolutely not. And I think Zach was a little disappointed that I didn't go through with it.
I mean, I can't believe that photographer thought he was going to get you to do that. That was the craziest thing ever. But kudos to you for standing your ground and not letting that happen. But I do remember the photo shoot came out well. You guys looked great in the magazine, looked great. Do you still have a copy of that magazine?
I do. And maybe like once a year, Ryan Cameron will randomly send me a picture of it through my text and just kind of harass me about it.
Ryan Cameron is the sports information director at Oklahoma State, and he's just giving you a hard time, isn't he?
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, that's great. Well, so our time together was pretty special. I got to coach you your senior year, and we had, you girls were training me. You were showing me a lot because I didn't really know what I was doing. There is a big difference in coaching on the women's side as opposed to the men's side. And I just wasn't smart enough to figure out, you've got to treat it differently. Now, I think you could have probably jumped right onto the men's team and been on the team, done all the workouts, literally been on the men's team without any issues. But not all girls could do that. And I just assumed if it's just coaching, so it's got to be the same. And can you remember any things that I may have done that probably wouldn't work on the women's side?
Yeah, there was a list. Do you remember when you asked Karin her size?
Yeah, I shouldn't have done that.
You weigh, Karin?
Yeah, I shouldn't have done that. That was bad.
Hey, do you weigh $120? And she said, yeah, in 6th grade, I weighed $120. And I believe I said, Coach, you can't ask us our weight.
I shouldn't have done that. I'm sorry about that. But
how about the first grocery store trip? Do you remember that one?
Yeah, I do. I remember it being pretty traumatic for me, actually.
So we go to the grocery store and we've got our snacks and we've got this. And well, Coach Weeks had taken care of us with the girl products in the past. And so one of us had thrown that up on the counter to be paid for. Well, you screamed like a little girl,
I did not.
ran out of the store
Did not.
and refused to pay for what you called deals. You remember that?
I remember that.
And then we kind of got you later on. I think every once in a while I'd drop one in the fairway when you were walking behind me, or I remember the last round I played, you asked for a pen and I handed you one and you were,
Yeah.
that was
Shocked.
kind of the end of that.
Well, you'd think a guy with 5 sisters and, you'd think I would have, but I didn't. So I just thought that was very uncomfortable. But anyway, um, to me, coaching women should have been exactly the same. It isn't, but there's certain things about coaching that are the same. I mean, I think any female golfer that I've ever coached, if they knew that I believed in them, if they knew that I was gonna sacrifice for them, if they knew I was gonna get down in the dirt and do the work with them, they'd run through a wall for me. And so I think that's probably the greatest thing about coaching women's golf. Once you gain their trust, it's set.
Absolutely. And like you were saying earlier, there were times that you and I would have our disagreements on things. Um, but I also appreciated that you knew how to push my buttons to motivate me. It was more of a, oh, I'll show him versus, oh, I just don't like him and how he's treating me. And so I think that's in coaching though, you try different things. You can push the buttons of some players and it'll work well, and other players, they just don't respond quite the same. And so you've got to figure out, what works with each player. And I've learned that in my coaching. Early on, I thought, tough, tough, tough. They'll figure it out and we're just going to play the best golf we can. And that's the only way to be a coach. And that's not how I coach today. I wasn't happy doing it that way. And I've made some changes in my approach that way as well.
Well, I think that's probably what I had to do that year. I'm going to tell one more story before. I love that, getting to talk about your philosophy, because that's where I want to go with this. But I remember starting the second semester, I'd had some meetings with some people and they said, you've just got to approach it differently. You got to treat girls differently. So I told the girls we were going to go up to Ponca City and eat Mexican food at the airport. Do you remember that?
Yes, we had a radio in each van.
We had a radio in each van. And what I gave you was a tour of Ponca City, Oklahoma, all the landmarks of my childhood.
Yeah.
And I can't believe I did this to this day. But I thought, oh, they'll get to know me. This is good. They'll get to know me. And then we ate Mexican food at an airport. It was like, okay, well, I was getting off to a better start. And then, of course, a month later, a girl didn't like the cold sandwich on a plane. So I was, but anyway, that was quite a trip.
You tried.
I was making the effort to try to get to know somebody, the girls, a little bit better. But that's one thing I think that you were talking about. You thought, I'm just going to be a tough coach. They'll figure it out. But you had to start learning how to connect with each person individually, didn't you? And build a relationship.
Absolutely. I made a lot of mistakes in my first coaching gig at OSU. I was young and I didn't know what I didn't know, and so, yeah, I wish I knew, what I know now back then, but that's just part of life's journey. But that's what I knew. I knew the OSU way of, we're going to be tough and we're going to figure it out and we're going to win a lot of golf tournaments doing it that way. And that's what I thought I had to be. And that's not my best self. And I think I struggled in that position because of that. I was very young, like I said, and I didn't know what I was missing, but it didn't quite work out how I wanted it to, but I'm forever grateful to Mike Holder for that opportunity. 26 years old and being a head coach of that top university was a little bit much for me at the time.
Well, I would look back on it, 2 observations I would make. One, you were at the final stage of LPGA Tour school when Mike Holder called you. I'll never forget that. I mean, here you are trying to get your tour card again, and you left the tour school and went straight to an interview with him, as I recall, something like that.
Yeah. So I came out right before Q school and came and did the interview and was offered the job. And then I, quickly decided I'm done playing. And so, that was a bit of a transition, tougher than I thought it would be, because I was still wanting to be competitive, tried to be competitive with the girls. And whether that was right or wrong, that's just kind of how it was. And so I was offered the job, and we had a very good team, very, very solid team. And so it was a good experience. Working with Coach Bratton was very nice, and he taught me a lot along the way.
You know, Coach Bratton obviously has become a really amazing men's golf coach on the men's side. He's great. If we could look back at that time, don't you think you'd have been better served if we would have hired you as the assistant coach at the time for Alan Bratton? If he'd have,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. Because you're going to learn from one of the best. And, that's kind of something that's hurt me in my coaching early on, is that I was never an assistant coach. And so I never saw that side of it. And I think that's a benefit for some to be able to do that. But yes, to me now it's a no-brainer to come in as the assistant coach under him. But
you know,
that's here or there.
I was just talking with Greg Sands at Texas Tech University, and he was hired as a 27-year-old head coach at Texas Tech, and he made some mistakes early on as well. And fortunately, he was able to, overcome those, and he's still there today doing a great job. But it's a bit of a challenge. And my assistant, Mikkel, is only 28 years old. Do I think he can handle this job? Absolutely. But he's also been an assistant for 6 years. So it's like he's seen all the mistakes head coaches make. He's seen all those, and he'll make some when he becomes a head coach. But I think that's probably the one thing that was working against you, is you were just a little too young. I look back on my time, I was still the head golf coach on the men's side at Oklahoma State. I would have given you a lot more guidance, a lot more help if I hadn't have been an absolute train wreck at the time. I was in a bad place.
Yeah, we were both in kind of a bad place at the time. And you know what? It makes us who we are today, and it is what it is, and we've moved forward, and we haven't let it ruin us. It's made us stronger people.
I think we were both very fortunate to be the coach there, and I think we're both better off now. We're in a different place, different situation. It's all good for both of us. But you definitely learned a lot of lessons in there. I was going to ask a question just before we get a little further. You said you made some mistakes. What's the biggest mistake you've made, you think, as a coach? Just something you think, man, I learned a lot from that. I wish I hadn't done it, but I learned enough where it's like, that's probably made me better.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, how I've handled different players. I would say my biggest mistake is I'm very competitive, and early on I would get upset when players would play bad, as if they were trying to play bad. I've turned that around to where it's almost like I feel sad when they play bad, because they put so much time and effort into it, and you learn to love the players. I felt like early on I didn't get to know the players. I just was their golf coach. And there were some players I got closer to, but I make a conscious effort to try to get to know them better off the golf course as well. And I would say that's my biggest thing, is to not bring that expectation of this is how we've got to play, and if we don't meet that, then to be upset about it. It's one thing to be upset about the finish, but it's a different thing to be upset about the player for the way they played.
Yeah, I have two very vivid memories. Those last 2 or 3 years when I was struggling. One time at Olympia Fields, when we had a kid make a quadruple bogey on the last hole from the middle of the fairway, and we went from 3rd to 8th. So it just crushed me. And then I gave Brian Goots, my assistant coach, a job. I asked him to sort of do a survey of me and just tell me honestly everything about my coaching style, what he liked, what he didn't like, what he thought I should change, whatever, and just be honest about it. And he just mentioned that he said, you're probably one of the happiest, most positive, upbeat, awesome guys in Stillwater. But when you go on the road, you're not that guy anymore. And he said, the kids notice. So what you're saying is you were sort of there with results based, right?
Very much results based. And, that's a little bit of the pressure of coaching in Stillwater. You see all those trophies, that you've got to win to, I don't know about keep your job, but you need to be successful there. And you and I have high expectations of ourselves. And so combine all that pressure, and I didn't do a very good job of it at the time. And I feel like I'm a lot better with that now.
Well, so lesson learned, and it's making for a much more fruitful career as you move forward. One of the things that I was going to ask you earlier, and I said I'm interested in this usually, but I am definitely interested. What was the very moment that you knew you were going to be a coach? I mean, because you were a player up until the time you became a coach. So describe the moment and what were you thinking about what you were. I mean, because you're not thinking I'm going to change this career because I'll just try it out. You really wanted to do this. So what was that moment
Absolutely.
like?
Well, so I didn't grow up thinking I want to be a golf coach. I wanted to be a Hall of Fame LPGA player. And my mind was set on that. I know during the early parts of trying to play, I only played professionally for 3.5 years. But maybe a year in, somebody had said to me, hey, there's a position open for an assistant coaching job. I think you should look into it. And I'm like, look into it. I still got 20 years to play on tour here, you know, but that short game still didn't fully figure itself out. Um, and so it took some time. That kind of put a little seed into my head of, hey, coaching, it'd be a lot of fun. Um, but then come my third year, I noticed when I was on the golf course, I was thinking about other things. And that had never been the case in my career of playing golf. I was thinking about what else could I be doing. And that's when I knew, you know what, it's time to get this figured out, what I wanted to do. And coaching was always something, I had a lot of good coaches, and so it wasn't really until, I got the conversation going with Coach Holder that I really started to think about, you know what, I can make a career of this, and I still get to be in the sport. I get to influence others. We get to still be competitive. And so it was kind of a short period of deciding, you know what, this is what I want to do.
That's great. I think that every coach has a moment, sort of a time frame when they know this is what I want to do. And here you are. How many years later now is that you've been coaching?
11.
11 years. I mean,
11.
that's quite a deal. And you're building a team there at Tulsa. You've got a really, really good thing going there, and it's great to see. But you guys didn't get to play in the fall. That must have been pretty disappointing. So talk about what you did with your team this past fall, due to COVID. What were you doing to help?
So our biggest goal during the fall when we weren't able to play tournaments is we were going to play tournaments at home. And so we had a tournament series mixed with match play, stroke play, just trying to get them to stay competitive with one another. They did a lot of playing individual tournaments, the GCAA that they could play in. They did a really good job of doing that. And so everything was pretty much everything was competition based. Whether it's we're hitting wedges, we're going to have a competition by the end of the day. We're having, a putting contest, whatever it may be. And I think we got a lot out of it. We did miss. It was hard to see other teams playing and not being able to compete. But I will say this, as a team, we got a lot closer because we got to hang out with each other, get to know one another. We did some team things just to get to know one another. And so I think that was good. It was good for our freshmen coming in that they got that adjustment early on, to not be thrown into the fire right away. And so hopefully the things we did will help us come the spring. I just think there's no substitution for competition. And so they've been trying to compete on their own the best they can.
And when do you start in the spring? When does your schedule start up?
We're early. So we start the 1st of February. We go to SMU. So they get back here next week, and then we'll quarantine for 5 days, and we'll be competing right away.
And then you're going to play a full schedule this spring all the way through your conference and regionals. And
Absolutely.
that's great. Well, you've mentioned the word competition or competing about 6 times in the last minute and a half. So you still have that in your blood. I thought it was so interesting last summer when we weren't able to recruit, weren't able to go out on the road and recruit. It's like coaches didn't have a whole lot we could do. We couldn't even go watch our own players because there were junior golfers at tournaments. So we couldn't be around golf. And you decided to do something very interesting. You decided to compete. What did you do last summer?
Yeah, so I don't know at what I think one of my players has kind of told me, "Hey, coach, state amps in July, you should come and play in it." And I haven't played a tournament in a while, but why not? And as it got closer and closer, the panic started to set in, and I did what Hunter Mahan used to call panic practice, and so I did a lot of panic practicing. Um, and then when we get to the tournament, the night before, I didn't sleep before match play. Well, going in, I had been told by somebody that it was a 2-day stroke play and then they make the cut. So I shoot my 76 first round and I'm like, okay, we got one more. I've got to play good tomorrow. It was a 1-day stroke play and then they made the cut. So fortunately, I got in and I think it was like the 5th seed or something. And then we got to my favorite match play and I just kind of figured it out. My dad had given me a swing tip the day before I played, started hitting it pretty nice. And then Caleb came and watched me my first match, and I ended up winning. I think I won 1-up. That was my closest match of the tournament. And he just said, "Annie, when you hit those shots, you just look not athletic out there. You're just looking old when you're swinging it. Get athletic over the ball." And so, and Caleb, he doesn't know a ton about golf, but those little tips I got kind of propelled me I started hitting the ball better than I've hit it in a long time. And it was just fun to compete.
Well, I applaud you for still wanting to compete a little bit, and you were kind of forced into it by COVID, but that's okay. You compete and you won the tournament, and that's a state amateur championship. That's a big trophy, by the way. You could shoot a basketball into that thing, couldn't you?
Yeah, it's huge. And the names that are on there, a lot of legends are on there and just kind of fun to get your name on there. I didn't expect to win. Inside you feel like, okay, I've got a chance to win this deal. But I would say going into it, I was very, very unsure of what would happen. But the competitiveness in me kind of woke me up and I just started playing golf again.
Well, and you figured out a way to overcome those nerves, and that's what you're asking your players to do. So it's probably a good experience for you to try to help your players. And there's nothing worse, in my opinion, than going into a tournament when you know you're not prepared.
Yes.
Whether you're a coach or a player or whatever, that's a bad feeling because you haven't done the job you should do. I absolutely, that's the most disappointed I ever am as a coach, is when I feel like I haven't prepared and I don't feel like I've prepared my players to compete, whether it's the Aggie Invitational or the Big 12 Championship or the National Championship. So it's a good reminder for you about, and the panic practice you were doing, I bet you did a lot of work. I bet you were working hard.
Yeah, I was, to whatever extent your body can kind of handle at this age of not playing a lot of golf. But the funny thing is when the girls got back to campus, well, they were chomping at the bit to whoop on me, day damn champ. So it's fun to get out there. I don't, I hope to try to defend it this summer, but we'll see how that goes with recruiting. But the girls enjoy when we go out and play against them. That's kind of a unique thing that we do. And it seems to work for our team. Everybody's different in that regard.
Well, that's great. I think it's neat that you can see. I remember your early years of coaching, and yes, you were a little more uptight. You were a little bit. I mean, you were just not as natural as you look like you are right now. And I haven't seen you coach in a long time, but just hearing in your voice, you can tell that a lot of that self-imposed pressure has been pushed to the side, and you've learned to deal with it. That's a great learning experience and a lot of growth, personal growth right there. So I applaud you for that as well.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So your team, you're getting ready to start your spring season. Do you have anything else you'd like to add today or anything you want to ask me?
Oh gosh. Looking back, coaching women's golf, what did you feel like was the difference between men's and women's golf? The biggest differences and what did you feel like you learned from coaching women?
Well, what coaching women taught me was women have to be coached a little differently. It's just a different animal. It's different, but that also gave me a realization that I've got 10 or 11 players on my team. All 10 of those guys have to be coached differently as well. And so, like, as you've seen your ability to connect with players increase and improve, so is your coaching, and so is their performance. Well, I mean, if I treat every guy the same, I'm gonna help some. I'm not gonna even come close to helping others, and others doesn't. Who knows? So it's like I need to do a better job of coaching the person, and so that's what coaching women's golf taught me. And I can't believe I was 44 years old when I learned it. Or 45. That's a long time into my coaching career to have learned that. But it's like it's never too late to learn things. So, but as I told you earlier in this podcast, I think girls will literally run through a brick wall for you if they trust you, if they know you're going to sacrifice for them, and if they know that you believe in them. And I think probably the same thing for guys. I think that they would feel the same way, and they want that. The modern day athlete, to me, is a lot different. He's wanting a relation. He or she's wanting a relationship with their coach. They want to connect with that coach, and so I think that's part that I've learned too as well. So I think you're doing a better job of it, and it's showing in the way you build relationships with players. So that's what I learned. That was the biggest thing I learned.
Yeah, and then the one thing I've also learned as a coach is you've never arrived. You've got to keep learning and developing your skill, whether it be the golf swing or whether it be these relationship things, or in the recruiting, whatever it may be. We got to continue to grow and get better in our profession if we want to continue to be good.
Yes, and I think that part of that is one of the real reasons I did this podcast. Well, Mikkel Andresen, my assistant, he's the one that said you need to do this. But I have been a benefit of a lot of wisdom from other coaches and former players and current players and people that once you ask questions, they just start coming out with this knowledge and this information. And so it's helping me learn and grow. And I have to. I mean, I'm 60, so it's like I'm at that point. You're still in your 30s, so you've got a lot in front of you, but I don't have as much in front of me. I've got to learn a whole lot very quickly to stay relevant. And
Right.
and if you don't do that, it won't take long, and you'll just be a non-relevant non-factor, and you don't want that. You're too competitive to do that. So
Absolutely.
yeah. Well, listen. Anything else you want to throw at me? That was a good question.
Let's see. How long are you going to coach? You going to be around for when Cam?
I'm just going to go on record as saying I will not be Cameron's coach. Your son, he's too young. I will not be his coach. But I am going to coach as long as I feel healthy, as long as I feel motivated, as long as I have energy, as long as I'm wanting to keep on learning. It's funny. My assistant coach before Mikkel was Ryan Blagg, and Ryan was an amazing assistant coach, and he got the job at Louisville. And I wondered how it would be to have another coach. And Mikkel's not better or worse. He's just different. But man, he pushes buttons, and he gets you to think, and he creatively thinks. So the disadvantage of being 60 is I have less creativity. Now, that's not necessarily a hard and fast rule, but you're pretty set in your ways. This is what I think. This is what I believe. And until you have somebody who kickstarts you and jumps and gets you out of that. Because right now, if you think you're going to stay in these same patterns of everything you're doing for the next 30, 25 years, or however long you want to coach, it's like, you better change, you better evolve and develop. And so even a guy's 60, and this is the perfect time to go into cruise control, just kind of ride it out to the end. But I don't want to do that. I have no desire to do that. And I wouldn't think you'd want to do that at your age either.
No, and it's not in your DNA to go on cruise control by any stretch, but that's the benefit of a good assistant, is to push and kind of push you to some uncomfortable levels, and pick your brain of maybe we can do it this way instead of how we have been doing it. And you guys have done a great job there. It's fun to see you doing well there. The podcasts are fun too, but it's really good to see you happy again. And those were some tough times at the end there at OSU, and so it's nice to see you happy and doing it the way you want to do it.
Yeah, I've enjoyed that. And this podcast is a perfect example of how Mikkel pushed me out of my comfort zone. I mean, it's not like I'm afraid to talk in public or to do this. That's not but it wouldn't be natural for me just to do this. but he said, I think you'll learn a lot. I think this will help Baylor. I think it'll help you. I think, and he's right. I've enjoyed this. And he's in on at least half of them where Mikkel's part of the interview or whatever. I mean, when we interviewed Greg Sands, Mikkel was obviously a part of that because he'd worked for Greg for 3 years. But I've been a benefit of that. And just hearing you talk today shows me, man, you've come a long way. And this is great to see that. And I'm just excited for your future. I can't believe you're still winning golf tournaments. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So before we finish, I have to do one more thing, and that is a speed round. So a couple of these questions I ask every single guest, but a lot of these are unique to you. And so I'm just going to ask them, and then you feel free to answer as you see fit. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If you had a choice, Shawshank Redemption or Remember the Titans?
Oh, Remember the Titans.
Atta girl. Your go-to meal before a tournament round. Let's say it's a breakfast for you.
A breakfast, something light, maybe some oatmeal, a protein shake, just something light to sit on my stomach.
Okay. George Strait or Jason Aldean?
Oh, George Strait.
Atta girl. I'm so upset when somebody answers modern day country because it isn't country. It's a talented musician, but he's not country anymore.
Pop in the country, right?
Pop in my country. I'm really upset about it. When's the last time you saw one of your players miss a fairway?
Oh gosh.
Fairways.
What's that?
You don't miss fairways.
Oh, we have a couple.
Oh, you have?
Yeah, maybe in November I saw him miss a couple.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Number one thing you look for in a recruit. Just the number one thing, the most important part.
Oh, competitiveness, how they handle themselves out there, but on the tough days, are they going to fight through it?
Okay. Favorite pro sports team?
The Las Vegas Raiders.
Really?
Yeah, you see my helmet up here.
I see that up there. That's right. Wow. A lot of people that don't know you don't realize you are a sports nut, a freak. I like that.
I've mellowed since, having Cam. We kind of have to pick our battles and watch different shows now.
I'm with you. Okay. Favorite Coach McGraw quirk?
Oh gosh.
And you got to limit it to one.
I love the little tweaks, I put my hand up on your hip. When I dip, you dip, we dip. When we get an ice cream cone, just little tweaks. I love them.
So the fact that I'll take pop culture and tweak it a little bit.
Yep.
Yeah, I do that. And right now I'm pretty much, my wife and I are not watching TV. So I'm losing all the pop culture. It's going away, which is fine with me. All right, final question. Dream foursome, you and 3 other players. Who are you going to play golf with?
My pops, my brother. Goodness gracious. I wouldn't mind playing with Ricky and Lorena Ochoa.
Lorena, she just about won that entire spring, your junior year. Just about every tournament, didn't she?
Yeah. She had the best hands I've ever seen.
Yeah, she was a great player. Well, Annie, thank you so much for coming on and joining us today. I think you gave a lot of really good, interesting perspectives on competitiveness, on learning lessons from mistakes we've made, and certainly coaching women's golf and how that's shaped you. And I'm just really excited to see your team play this spring and just going forward. Congratulations with everything you've done. And thanks again for coming on the Better Than I Found It podcast.
Thanks, Coach. I appreciate you.
All right. Thank you, Annie.